Karen stood on the boat, her reflection trembling on the water, a cruel smile twisting her face. "Your baby's voice is like poison, disturbing the whole neighborhood," she screamed, her voice dripping with venom. Before I could react, she grabbed the stroller and in a single heart-stopping moment threw it straight into the lake. The splash echoed through the air, and my wife's blood-curdling scream tore through the evening. Karen stood on the boat, arms crossed over her chest, pride flashing in her eyes. She thought she had won. But she didn't know. I am the police chief, and tonight, justice wouldn't be written on paper. It would be delivered by my hands. Before the story unfolds, comment below which country you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more unbelievable HOA stories. Karen arrived in the neighborhood with the kind of precision that could only belong to someone who considered chaos a tool, a weapon, a form of art. She didn't stumble upon our lives by accident. Every step, every move, every smirk on her face was deliberate, a calculated intrusion meant to destabilize, intimidate, and terrorize. I could see it in the way her heels clicked against the pavement as she exited her car, a sharp rhythm that seemed to echo through the quiet street, announcing her arrival like a herald of misfortune. She had that look, the cold, merciless gaze of someone who believed she owned not only the streets, but also the lives of everyone who dared live within her meticulously ordered community. And as she moved toward the stroller, my pulse quickened. Not just from the adrenaline of impending conflict, but from the sickening realization that she had come fully prepared to cross every moral line, to turn a simple act of parenting into a personal battlefield, to weaponize fear and cruelty against the most innocent in our lives. She grasped the stroller with ease, almost delicately, as if it were a harmless object, but I could feel the sinister intent vibrating from her every movement. There was no hesitation in her hands, no flicker of doubt in her eyes, only a ruthless certainty that what she was about to do was not only justified in her mind, but deserved. Righteous, the final answer to some imagined affront. I shouted, my voice cracking with panic and disbelief, a raw, urgent plea that the world might hear, that she might hear, that she might reconsider even for a fraction of a second. But my words were swallowed by the distance between us, the metallic roar of her resolve, and the still, heavy air of the neighborhood that seemed to lean in, watching, waiting, complicit in its silence. She carried the stroller to the small boat moored at the lake, each step measured, deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if she were performing some grotesque rite, a public declaration of power, dominance, cruelty. The boat engine roared to life, cutting through the lake's surface with a force that seemed disproportionate to the vessel's size, splashing water onto the edges of the dock, the ripples carrying an ominous prelude to what was coming. My legs moved before my mind could catch up, pounding across the gravel with a speed I hadn't known I possessed, my lungs burning, my heart hammering against my ribcage like it wanted to escape, like it knew the danger before my consciousness fully did. I screamed again, a raw, primal sound that was half command, half prayer. But the boat had already drifted too far into the middle of the lake, and the distance felt infinite, insurmountable, like every meter was a countdown to disaster. Then she did it. She lifted the stroller with a single, fluid motion, her arms steady, unwavering, almost elegant in the horror of it, and flung it into the water as though casting a die, as though fate itself were hers to command. The splash that followed was not just a sound. It was a rupture, a violent punctuation that echoed across the water and into the very bones of the world, and it carried with it every shred of terror, shock, and helplessness that can be compressed into a single moment. My wife's scream cut through the night air like a blade, a sound so sharp, so full of raw anguish that it threatened to shatter me entirely. I tore off my jacket instinctively, the fabric clinging to my arms as I dove into the freezing water without thought. Without calculation, propelled only by instinct, desperation, and a father's unyielding love. Beneath the surface, the lake became a different universe, cold and dark, a realm where visibility shrank, where every movement had to be measured against currents and unseen predators. Shadows moved beneath me, darker, larger than the ripples themselves, circling, drawn by the chaos, by the scent of fear and blood, and I knew instinctively that they were sharks, creatures both natural and merciless, agents of nature's indifference that now intersected with human cruelty. Above, Karen remained in the boat, her hands crossed, her posture radiating confidence, triumph, a sickly kind of joy in watching the terror she had unleashed. She believed she had won, believed that control, domination, and fear could bend reality itself to her whims. But she had no idea, no inkling, that the man diving into these depths was not just a father, but the police chief. Someone trained not only to survive, but to act, to respond, to turn danger into opportunity, and above all, someone whose love for his child would override every rational fear, every instinct for self-preservation. My body cut through the water with purposeful strokes, each movement a combination of urgency, calculation, and raw desperation. I reached the stroller just as a fin sliced the water a few feet away, a harbinger of immediate death if I failed. My hands gripped the edges, feeling the wet metal and fabric, and I lifted my child against my chest, protecting her with every ounce of strength I possessed. The sharks reacted instantly, drawn closer by movement, by the scent, by the irresistible pull of vulnerability, but I was not about to surrender. Each kick, each twist, each strategic maneuver against the predators was an act of defiance, a testament to the unbreakable bond between father and child. Karen's laughter reached me across the water, a toxic, venomous sound that fueled my resolve rather than diminished it, as though the sheer audacity of her cruelty demanded an equal measure of courage in response. I would not fail, could not fail, and as I maneuvered, aligning myself with the dangling rope from her boat, I could feel the first inkling of hope, the path to survival, and the first threads of the reckoning that awaited Karen. Every second stretched into eternity, the lake itself seeming to hold its breath. The water and predators waiting for my next move, but I was ready, and I would not let the night's horrors claim what mattered most. The water was icy, biting through my clothes and chilling me to the bone, but I hardly noticed because my entire being focused on the tiny, fragile life in my arms. Every stroke I took seemed both impossibly slow and excruciatingly fast as adrenaline surged through me, propelling me forward. My lungs burned, my heart thrashed. But I ignored every ache and every tremor because if I hesitated, if I faltered for even a fraction of a second, she would be gone. The baby's cries, small yet piercing, cut through the night air above and the muffled rush of water below, sounding both like a warning and a plea, a fragile sound that demanded everything I had. I tightened my grip, pressing her close to my chest, feeling the warmth of her tiny body and the desperate rhythm of her heartbeat. Every instinct screamed at me to fight harder, faster, to survive and protect, and the stakes had never been clearer. Beneath the surface, the lake was alive with danger. Dark shapes circled, fins slicing through the water with calculated precision. The sharks smelled fear, smelled blood, smelled movement, and they began to close in, their sleek bodies gliding closer with lethal intent. I could feel them in the shadows of my vision, in the subtle shifts of water, and I knew they would not hesitate for a moment. My mind ran through every training exercise, every lesson, every instinct I had honed over years of service. But nothing had truly prepared me for this, protecting my child from both a human predator above and a natural one beneath. Karen's laughter rang out over the water, high-pitched and cruel, full of venom that seemed to dissolve the air around me. "You really think you can stop this?" she shouted, her voice carrying across the dark lake like a whip. "They're mine! You'll never save them!" The sound should have unnerved me, but instead it focused me, sharpened my determination, fueled the unyielding storm of fury that rose in my chest. I adjusted my position, keeping my arms locked around the baby, turning and kicking in ways that made me cut diagonally through the water to avoid the circling predators. My fingers brushed against the sharp teeth of one shark, the tip of its snout missing my shoulder by mere inches, and I felt the raw power of life and death closing in with every heartbeat. I thought of my wife, her face pale, eyes wide with terror, screaming my name from the shore, her voice desperate, useless, unable to reach me through the vastness of water and chaos. I thought of every moment we had shared as a family, every laugh, every tear, every promise I had made to keep them safe, and it steeled me, binding me with an unbreakable resolve. I would not fail. I could not fail. The baby's cries grew louder, her tiny voice a combination of fear and confusion, and my grip tightened, pressing her closer to my chest. I began to maneuver toward the rope dangling from the edge of Karen's boat, calculating every movement, every kick, every twist, knowing that a single misstep could be fatal. The sharks adjusted, following my motion, circling more aggressively, their fins cutting arcs through the moonlit water like knives, testing my endurance, my focus, my courage. I knew that if I hesitated, if I faltered for even a second, the result would be catastrophic, unthinkable, a nightmare made flesh. I forced myself to breathe in sharp, controlled gasps, forcing my mind to focus on the single, unrelenting goal: get the baby out alive. Karen's laughter continued, dripping with malice, and I realized that her cruelty went beyond mere physical danger. Her satisfaction in seeing fear, in orchestrating terror, was as lethal as any predator in the lake. I thought of her smug expression, standing in that boat, arms crossed, the picture of twisted triumph, and it ignited a different kind of fury inside me. I would not allow her satisfaction to define this moment. I would not allow her to win. My legs burned from constant kicking, my shoulders screamed from the pull of resistance, my lungs begged for air, but I ignored all of it. Every ounce of pain was secondary to the goal, secondary to the life in my arms. Finally, my hand brushed against the rope, rough against my wet fingers, and I seized it with a strength I didn't know I had. I began to pull myself toward the boat, moving carefully yet quickly, aware that the sharks were not going to back down. Their circling became more aggressive, their movements synchronized, their intent lethal. My body strained as I lifted the baby higher, maneuvering toward the side of the boat, my arms trembling from exertion but refusing to fail. The rope held, and I began the delicate, heart-stopping process of climbing, knowing that every second above the water could change everything. Karen's eyes widened as she realized I wasn't helpless, as she saw the determination, the sheer defiance in my movements. She could not comprehend that this was no ordinary father, no ordinary man. This was a police chief, trained, skilled, unrelenting, and most importantly, unyielding when it came to the life of his child. The sharks surged closer, sensing the approaching victory, and I felt the water churn violently below. Waves slapping against my body as I climbed, each pull on the rope a battle of its own. The baby, fragile but alive, pressed against me, her small fists curling against my chest, and I whispered urgent, incoherent promises to her, a torrent of words fueled by love, desperation, and defiance. Karen's smug smile faltered, a flicker of doubt flashing across her face for the first time, and I realized that even her calculated cruelty had limits. She had no idea who she was facing, no comprehension of the force that drove me, the skill, the courage, the unbreakable bond between father and child. My muscles screamed, my body ached, my lungs burned, but I would not release my grip, not on the rope, not on the baby, not on the future that mattered more than anything else in this world. The water roared around us, the night air thick with tension, but the climb continued, one agonizing, excruciating movement at a time until finally, inch by inch, I reached the edge of the boat, dragging the baby with me, poised between death and salvation, the sharks circling, the night itself holding its breath, and for the first time, I felt the smallest glimmer of hope that we could survive this nightmare and that Karen's reign of cruelty would meet its reckoning at last. The water churned violently around me, each wave slapping my face and threatening to pull me under, but I refused to falter. My arms ached from the relentless motion of swimming, from the constant tension of holding the baby close to my chest, from the struggle to stay afloat while darkness and danger surrounded us. Beneath me, the lake had transformed into a living nightmare. Shadows twisted in the depths, sleek, powerful shapes cutting through the water with lethal precision. The first shark surged upward without warning, its gaping jaws snapping mere inches from my arm. I twisted, barely avoiding its teeth, feeling the water explode around me as it collided with nothing but the current. My heart hammered in my chest, not from fear, but from the raw, instinctive need to protect the life I held in my arms. Another shadow appeared from the left, gliding silently, calculating its strike, and I knew that if I hesitated, if I allowed myself even a fraction of distraction, the outcome would be fatal. Karen's voice rang out above the water, sharp and cutting, filled with triumphant malice. She laughed, high-pitched and cruel, certain that the lake and its predators would finish what she had started, that she had orchestrated the perfect moment of terror and that nothing could stop it. Her delight echoed in my ears, fueling a surge of anger that twisted through my body, sharpening my senses and focusing my mind. I was no ordinary man at this moment. I was a father. I was the police chief. Every instinct, every training session, every lesson learned in years of service coalesced into a single, unyielding determination: survive and protect. The baby's whimpers pressed into my chest, tiny sounds of fear and confusion that were somehow more piercing than the roar of the water or the snapping of jaws, and I tightened my grip, pressing her against me with unshakable resolve. My body moved automatically, muscles burning, legs kicking with precision, arms slicing through the water with deliberate strength, creating angles and distance between us and the predators. I could feel the lake shifting around me as more shadows converged, testing my speed, my focus, my endurance. One shark lunged from below, teeth snapping toward my leg, and I kicked hard, sending it veering off course, only for another to approach from the right, circling, relentless, sensing the adrenaline and fear radiating from me. I adjusted my movements, calculating each stroke, each turn, each kick, aware that every second mattered, aware that the rope dangling from the boat above was our lifeline, that our survival depended on reaching it before instinct and hunger claimed what it sought. Karen leaned over the side of her boat, arms crossed, a cruel smirk on her face, oblivious to the fact that her actions had underestimated the man she was challenging. She didn't know the training, the skills, the force that drove me, that I had faced dangers many could not imagine, and that my purpose now was singular and absolute. She watched, thinking we were doomed, that her cruelty and her confidence would prevail, that the sharks would exact the punishment she imagined. But I would not allow that. My movements became sharper, faster, more precise. The baby clutched against me like a treasure I would not relinquish. Each second stretched into eternity, the lake's chaos mirrored by the chaos of my mind, calculating, anticipating, defending, advancing, all in one fluid motion. I twisted as another shark lunged, using my shoulder and forearm to deflect its attack, feeling the rush of water and the heat of survival surge through me. The baby cried out, a fragile, urgent sound that made the water around us feel impossibly heavy, but also made my purpose crystal clear. The rope was within reach. Inch by inch, I maneuvered toward it, my body burning, my lungs screaming for air, my mind screaming at me to hold on, to survive, to rise above the terror. Karen's laughter faltered slightly as she saw the calculated movements, the focus, the unrelenting determination, and a flicker of doubt crossed her face. She had miscalculated. She had not accounted for the skill, the courage, or the unwavering love that propelled me. The first hand gripped the rope, wet and slippery, but it held. I pulled, using every ounce of strength, dragging the baby closer to safety. The sharks surged below, teeth snapping, circling, sensing the shift, sensing our movement, but my resolve would not falter. Another surge of adrenaline hit me, my legs kicking harder, arms straining as I climbed, inch by agonizing inch, toward the side of the boat. Karen's smug expression wavered, panic flickering in her eyes as the realization of her misjudgment began to settle. I could feel the final challenge approaching, the moment when survival and danger collided, when instinct, skill, and love would be tested against cruelty, nature, and fear. With the baby pressed firmly to my chest, I climbed the last few inches, muscles screaming, water churning below, the predators circling relentlessly, and for the first time, I allowed myself to believe just for a heartbeat that we could survive this orchestrated nightmare, that the lake would not claim us, and that Karen's twisted plan would be undone by nothing more than sheer courage and unyielding devotion. The rope shuddered violently in my hands, wet strands slipping through my fingers as the baby clutched against my chest, tiny limbs trembling, tiny cries piercing the air, a fragile sound of fear and confusion that made my heart pound even harder. Each sob a reminder that every second mattered, that our survival hung by a thread, and that Karen's cruelty knew no limits. Her hands moved with deliberate precision, a knife flashing under the sun as she began cutting at the rope. Strands falling away into the churning water below, splashing among the circling predators with a hiss of friction and tension. And I realized instantly that she had not just orchestrated our fall, but now sought to ensure our final defeat. That her plan had multiple layers of malice. Layers I had to unravel even as my muscles screamed from the climb and my lungs burned from exertion. The boat pitched slightly, swaying with the wind and water, and Karen shifted, leaning over the edge. Her expression twisted with anticipation, a smile that was part victory and part pure sadistic delight. And I knew she was imagining the moment when the baby and I would plunge helplessly into the lake, our bodies at the mercy of teeth and hunger, while she would stand above, triumphant, gloating in her perceived supremacy, blind to the force she had provoked. The baby whimpered again, a small, urgent sound that sharpened my focus, that made my grip tighten instinctively, that made my resolve absolute. I could feel the rope's fibers slipping, fraying under Karen's precise cuts, yet every instinct I had as a father, as a protector, as the police chief, told me to fight, to hold on, to survive for the life I carried against my chest. And I tightened my arms, anchoring my weight, wrapping my legs around the rope, feeling the friction bite into my skin. Pain a distant companion to urgency and necessity. Karen's laughter sliced through the air, high-pitched, cruel, intoxicatingly confident, The kind of laughter that seeks to unnerve and dominate. And I could see her eyes glittering as she measured her success, not realizing that every movement I made was calculated, that every strain of muscle, every exhaled breath, every inch gained was directed by decades of training, instincts honed over years of experience in law enforcement, and fueled by a love so fierce it would defy fear, fatigue, and the very forces of nature surrounding us. The rope snapped suddenly under Karen's latest cut, and my heart leaped, a jolt of panic threatening to overwhelm me. Yet I clung, gripping the frayed strands with one hand, using the other to brace the baby, twisting my body, feeling the burn in my shoulders, my arms, my legs, and refusing to surrender to the chaos, refusing to allow terror to define our fate, knowing that surrender here meant death, knowing that every second of hesitation could be fatal, yet forcing myself to move with precision, balancing weight, calculating angles, preparing to shift to safety. Water splashed around my torso as the rope's tension shifted, my body swinging precariously above the lake, each motion measured to prevent a catastrophic fall, and below the predators sensed movement, circling with intent, their dorsal fins slicing the water like knives, their eyes bright, calculating, anticipating, waiting for the moment when I faltered. And I felt a surge of primal awareness, every sense heightened, every instinct screaming that we were the hunted, yet unwilling to yield to fear, unwilling to let Karen's cruelty dictate the outcome. The baby's cries intensified, sharp and urgent, and I pressed her closer, feeling the warmth of her body against mine, the fragility of her existence in contrast to the raw danger around us, and it sharpened my focus, gave clarity to every action, every calculated move, and I realized that Karen's overconfidence was her greatest mistake, that in underestimating me, in assuming my fear and exhaustion would triumph over skill and determination, she had set the stage for her own failure. And I drew upon the deepest reserves of strength, of patience, of tactical thinking, leveraging the frayed rope, shifting my weight inch by agonizing inch, towards the side of the boat, feeling the fibers cut, feeling the tension in my grip, feeling the bite of adrenaline and fear merge into a singular drive, singular purpose, absolute necessity. Karen's movements became more frantic, more precise, each cut calculated, each effort to sever our connection to safety deliberate, and I could feel the boat sway beneath her, feel the unpredictability of water, feel the teeth below sensing every movement, every shift, and I knew that this was the crucible. The moment when instinct, experience, love, and courage collided against cruelty, against nature, against calculated malice, and I refused to yield, refused to fall, refused to allow Karen's plan to succeed. For there was nothing beyond the child's safety, nothing beyond survival, nothing beyond justice, and with a final desperate surge using every ounce of strength, every shred of skill, every bit of resolve, I swung the baby securely onto my chest, anchored my feet against the rope, and prepared to make the final climb to safety, knowing that the lake, the sharks, and Karen's twisted triumph were only temporary obstacles, that the fight was not over, but that each movement, each calculated motion, each ounce of determination brought us closer to survival, brought us closer to exposing Karen's true nature, brought us closer to rewriting the outcome of a nightmare that she had orchestrated with precision and cruelty. And I refused to let it end in tragedy, refused to let fear dominate, refused to allow evil to triumph. For the rope might fray, the water might surge, the predators might circle, but the heart of a father, a police chief, and protector could not, and would not surrender. And I knew that in this battle of skill, wit, and courage, we would emerge alive. And Karen's plan would collapse under the weight of her own underestimation, her own hubris, her own failure to understand that some forces, some bonds, some determination cannot be broken, cannot be undone, and that no matter how sharp the knife, how frayed the rope, how hungry the predator, love, skill, courage, and unyielding will could and would overcome any obstacle she placed in our path. The ropes descended from the approaching boats, slicing through the water like lifelines of salvation, and I could feel every vibration, every tremor as they touched the waves around us. The frayed ends of my rope still clutched tightly in one hand, while the baby's tiny body pressed against my chest. Trembling with exhaustion and fear, her small fingers clutching the collar of my jacket, her eyes wide and searching as if sensing both danger and hope in the same breath. And I realized that survival was now more than instinct, more than muscle, more than courage. It was precision, timing, and trust. Trust in the hands reaching down from the boat. Trust in the trained officers who risked their own lives to pull us from the teeth of peril. And every second counted because the water churned violently, the sharks circling like living torpedoes beneath, their fins cutting arcs through the surface. their eyes bright with hunger and anticipation, measuring every splash, every movement. And I could feel my heart hammering in rhythm with the baby's soft cries, a juxtaposition of vulnerability and strength that fueled my determination to reach solid ground, to escape this nightmare that Karen had orchestrated with calculated malice. I shifted the baby slightly, pressing her against me, and guided her little arms to wrap around my neck, feeling her grip tighten instinctively. And every instinct I had screamed to move carefully, not to panic, not to allow the sudden motions of the water or the swaying of the rope to destabilize us, to prevent the predators below from sensing weakness, and the officers above coordinated with perfect timing, lowering their own weight against the line, shouting encouragements, commands, and precise instructions that I followed with exactitude, every movement choreographed by necessity, fear, and sheer will, because one wrong step, one slip of the hand, could plunge us back into the icy jaws of the lake's deadly inhabitants, and I could feel Karen on the boat, her expression morphing from smug triumph to confusion to disbelief, her hands clutching the edge as if to steady herself against the mounting realization that she had underestimated the depth of my resolve. The training I carried, the authority embedded in my position as police chief, and the love that drove every action, every heartbeat, every surge of strength that pushed me upward against gravity, against water, against the circling threat. The rope groaned under my weight, the baby's warmth a counterpoint to the cold bite of the lake, and I shifted, wrapping one leg around the rope, feeling the friction against my skin, adjusting my grip, inching upwards while listening to the officers' voices guiding my balance, telling me when to tighten, when to release, when to swing slightly to counter the pull of the waves, and the baby whimpered softly, her small head pressing against my shoulder, and I whispered to her, not in words she could understand, but in tones that conveyed safety, reassurance, and love, because in this moment, sound was less important than presence, less important than action, less important than survival, and I knew that if we could reach the boat, if I could anchor us safely above the surface, Karen's plan would collapse entirely, her cruelty exposed not just to the water, not just to the predators, but to the law itself, to the truth that she had failed to comprehend in her arrogance. My hands burned, my arms ached, my body trembling from exertion, but the rope remained firm. The officer's guidance steady, and every inch gained was a victory. Every shift closer to the boat a reprieve from the teeth below, a step toward exposing the monster who had orchestrated this. A moment when justice and instinct converged into one undeniable force. And I could see the tension in Karen's eyes as she realized that she was powerless, that the very man she had sought to destroy commanded authority far beyond her imagination, that her schemes, her lies, her malice could not undo the bond between a father and his child, could not prevent the culmination of training, courage and parental instinct from prevailing. The baby squirmed slightly, a reflexive motion that made me tighten my hold and adjust the rope, swinging cautiously toward the side of the boat, feeling the officer's hands grasp the rope as I came within reach, their strength supplementing mine, and I could hear Karen's sharp intake of breath, a noise of disbelief, frustration, and panic that replaced the laughter she had once used as a weapon. And I knew in that moment that everything she had orchestrated was failing, unraveling thread by thread as the boat rose beneath our combined weight, the water lapping furiously against the hull, the shadows of sharks visible beneath us as they circled, frustrated by our survival. And I felt the baby cling tighter, her tiny fists pressing against my neck as if aware that she was moments from safety. And with one final heave coordinated perfectly with the officers, we broke the last tension of the rope, lifted above the water, onto the side of the boat, and I pulled her onto the deck, her soft cries replaced by whimpers of relief, her small body shaking but alive, and I held her close, feeling her heartbeat against mine, feeling the adrenaline ebb slightly, knowing that for this moment we had triumphed, that Karen's plan had failed spectacularly, that the teeth below, the water, and her cruelty had not claimed us. And I could see the rage, the disbelief, the fear in her eyes as the officers closed in, restraining her, and the realization that she had miscalculated, that she had underestimated the father, the protector, the police chief, filled the air. And I felt a quiet satisfaction in the culmination of survival, courage and skill, knowing that the child's safety was secured, the predators below thwarted, and the justice that Karen had evaded for so long was finally manifest, that the night of terror, the struggle against water, rope, and sharks had ended not with tragedy, but with triumph, and the baby rested finally against my chest, eyes wide, tiny fingers curled in relief as Karen's fate was sealed, her malice finally overcome by the unwavering determination, skill and love of a father, a protector, and a chief of police. Karen sat in the back of the squad car, her designer sunglasses now reflecting not confidence but fear, the stiffness in her posture betraying the panic she had tried to hide behind arrogance and a false sense of control. Her lips pursed in defiance while her mind raced, spinning excuses, lies, and narratives she hoped would somehow shift blame, rewrite history, or at least convince anyone that she was innocent. And I could see the calculation faltering, the carefully constructed mask cracking, the reality of her failure pressing in from all sides, because she had underestimated one simple truth, one undeniable fact. I was not just the father, not just a protector, but the police chief. And my knowledge, my authority, and my determination ensured that every action she had taken, every malicious plan, every cruelty against an innocent child would be revealed in vivid, undeniable clarity, no corner of deception safe, no lie unchallenged, no manipulation permitted to stand. And as we drove toward the station, the weight of her choices settled heavily in the air, a tangible tension that filled the vehicle like a storm before a lightning strike. And I could feel the officers around her, trained, disciplined, aware of every detail, observing, recording, and preparing to confront her with the evidence that would make her power meaningless. Because power derived from fear, cruelty, and control was nothing when confronted with law, evidence, and truth. And every statement she had crafted to twist reality would crumble under scrutiny. Every hesitation, every smirk, every flicker of panic betraying her awareness that she had no escape. No allies, no plan, only the inevitable confrontation with justice, the reckoning she had so long believed she could evade, and I prepared mentally to guide the process, knowing that the child's safety had already been secured, the immediate threat neutralized. But the psychological damage, the trauma, and the exposure of her intent required careful precision, because justice was not merely about punishment, but about truth, closure, and the demonstration that malice has consequences, that no one, not even someone confident in their manipulation, in their ability to command fear, can escape accountability when faced with incontrovertible evidence and unwavering resolve. As we arrived at the station, the officers quickly ushered her inside, separating her from the public, ensuring that every interaction would be controlled, every word recorded, every movement observed, because the story had to be told correctly, because the narrative mattered, because the fear she once wielded like a weapon had to be replaced by the undeniable consequences of her actions. And as she sat in the interrogation room, still attempting feeble attempts at deflection, at casting blame, I revealed my identity fully, letting the weight of the truth sink in, letting her realize that the person she had sought to intimidate, to overcome, to destroy was not only present but empowered, positioned to expose every layer of her crimes, and her expression shifted from arrogance to disbelief to fear as I recounted, step by step, every malicious plan she had attempted. Every act of cruelty against the child and against the family, every detail from the lake, from the rope, from the sharks circling below, from the moments of terror that she had orchestrated with calculated precision. And the officers listened, confirming details, documenting the narrative, ensuring that nothing was left ambiguous. Because in the courtroom, clarity, precision, and undeniable evidence were the instruments of justice. And Karen could no longer hide behind charm, manipulation, or false innocence, because the law now stood firmly in the truth of what had occurred, and every lie, every half-truth she attempted to offer was dismantled, contradicted by video evidence, witness testimony, and my direct account, a narrative so compelling, so detailed, so irrefutable that it left no room for doubt, no margin for reinterpretation, no space for evasion. And as the case moved to court, the public became aware of the gravity of her actions, of the horror she had inflicted, of the risk she had placed upon an innocent child. And the courtroom itself became a theater of accountability, where every officer's report, every medical assessment, every witness statement converged to construct a narrative of cruelty, malice, and attempted murder, leaving Karen isolated, exposed, and powerless, her reputation shattered, her schemes fully unveiled, and her attempts to manipulate the court or the jury rendered meaningless, because evidence, courage, and truth always outweigh fear, always prevail over deception. And I watched as the judge listened attentively, reviewing the documentation, considering the testimonies, understanding the calculated nature of her actions, and when the verdict was finally delivered, it was precise, unyielding, and just 15 years for attempted murder, for cruelty, for the deliberate orchestration of terror, 15 years to reflect the weight of malice and the cost of threatening an innocent life. And as the sentence was read aloud, I held my child close, feeling her small heartbeat against mine, the tension of the past hours melting slightly into relief, knowing that survival had been secured not only by courage and action, but by law and accountability, that Karen's influence, her cruelty, her reign of terror had been terminated through a combination of evidence, skill, and unwavering resolve. And as the officers escorted her from the courtroom, handcuffed and subdued, her face contorted in disbelief, I realized that the nightmare that had begun at the lake had reached its logical and moral conclusion, that the child's safety, the father's courage, and the authority of law had all converged to deliver justice, that the city, the community, and the innocent could now breathe with a sense of security previously denied, that the terror once wielded by Karen was now replaced with accountability, that the story of survival, courage, and truth had come full circle. And as I stepped outside the courthouse, child in arms, sunlight warming our faces, I knew that the ordeal, though harrowing, had proven a timeless truth. Malice may strike, cruelty may attempt to dominate. But in the end, love, courage, and justice will prevail, ensuring that innocence is protected, wrongdoers are held accountable, and the principles of law and morality endure, leaving the family intact, the city safer, and Karen's ambitions utterly and permanently defeated, a testament to the power of truth and the unyielding resolve of a parent, a protector, and a police chief.